Dallas closes out preseason with a 31-13 win over Atlanta, and on the surface that looks tidy. You want wins heading into cutdown week. But the real value from this one is what it tells us about who's likely to make the roster and who's fighting for scraps. A few players didn't suit up, and that alone sends messages. Jalen Tolbert didn't play, which feels like a good sign he's trending toward the 53, and Andrew Booth also sat and frankly looks like a lock. Deone Clark wasn't even dressed. Maurice Leaf was listed as the emergency linebacker, and Hakeem Adonai didn't play either. I'd rather roster Ani Cornelius than Adonai, so Adonai's absence reads like a nod toward roster security for others. Those little non-appearances matter more than you might think in these final preseason reps. Now for the winners, and I'll be blunt, Joe Milton is near the top. This was by far his most enjoyable preseason showing for the Cowboys. He was a viable quarterback in that game, made some nice, deep throws, showed poise when he took off as a runner, and while some throws were off and there were drops, overall the vibe was better. If you were on the fence about Milton's arm or whether he deserves a look for QB2 or a roster spot, tonight helped him. On the offensive front, the running back room flashed some interesting things too. Deuce Vaughn continues to make plays when given real opportunities, and he's added special teams value. Phil Maffa flashed as a late-round grinder who can lower the shoulder and move the chains. Miles Sanders, though, is very much in danger. Limited production and a shoulder issue make him the wild card of this group. Up front defensively, Mazi Smith got noticed more than usual. He wasn't just rotating out early for rest. He made some plays and looked more impactful than we'd seen recently. Perrion Winfrey also turned heads, disruptive on obvious pass rush snaps. And James Houston may be somebody I'd fight to keep if I were in charge. Finally, there were clear losers too. Rell got picked on and had that touchdown lapse. Trayvon Holden had body catches and drops that you just can't afford in a preseason finale. And a few veterans like Will Grier didn't do enough to cement anything beyond a vested veteran role. Bottom line, this game clarified more than it changed. If you're tracking cutdown drama, this was one of the last meaningful data points. Tell me below, who was your single biggest winner tonight? A. Joe Milton. B. Deuce Vaughn. C. Mazi Smith. Vote and defend your pick. And if you want non-stop roster cutdown content, hit subscribe. We're chasing $16,000, and every sub helps get this channel to the next level. Joe Milton walked into this preseason finale with questions about whether he was even worth keeping around, and he walked out looking like a different quarterback. The numbers won't blow you away at first glance. 10 completions on 18 attempts, with some throwaways and a few drops mixed in, but the difference was in the way he carried himself and the way the ball came out of his hand. For the first time this preseason, it felt like you were watching an actual backup quarterback rather than just a big arm trying to figure it out. He threw with touch. He hit some deep shots that reminded you why his talent has always intrigued scouts, and he ran the ball with purpose. Now, he still has to clean things up. He has a tendency to hold the ball a split second too long, and when he's running toward the sticks, he has to remember to stretch that ball out. Those details can decide games in the regular season. But when you zoom out, this was the Milton Cowboys fans had been hoping to see. The one who makes you believe he could be more than just a camp body. The natural question is what this means for the quarterback room. Will Grier has been in this spot before, floating between practice squad and roster consideration. Against Atlanta, Grier went 4 of 6, threw for 40 yards, took a sack, and even put the ball on the ground before recovering it. Nothing in that stat line screams security. And unlike Milton, Grier doesn't have developmental upside. He's a veteran. The practice squad makes sense for him, but that depends on how Dallas views Milton. If they believe he can be groomed behind Dak Prescott, he has value. If not, then he's just another preseason arm. That's where this final tape really matters. Milton showed enough to at least put pressure on the decision makers, and that's all you can ask from a young quarterback at this stage. So let me throw it to you. What grade are you giving Joe Milton for that performance? A, B, C, D, or F? Drop your grade in the comments and don't just give the letter, tell me why. And bigger picture, would you trust him as QB2 behind Dak if the season started tomorrow? Yes or no? That's the real debate. And while you're thinking about it, make sure you hit subscribe. We're pushing toward 16,000, and every click keeps you plugged in for roster cutdown updates the moment they drop. The running back room is one of the most fascinating storylines coming out of this preseason, and the Falcons game only added fuel to the fire. Let's start with Deuce Vaughn. Every time he gets meaningful snaps that aren't just garbage time dives up the middle, he produces. Whether it's in the run game or on special teams, Vaughn has consistently flashed enough to keep his name in the conversation. Against Atlanta, he was the first running back to get work in returns, even ahead of Jaden Blue, which raised some eyebrows. He doesn't have the size of a typical backfield option, but the effort, quickness, and versatility are there. Special teams coaches love players who can give them multiple looks, and Vaughn is making that case week by week. Then you've got Phil Maffa, the late rounder who runs with more power than anyone else in the room. He's not flashy, but he's physical and lowers his pads to get tough yards. That dimension is missing from the rest of the depth chart. Yes, he dropped a pass he should have caught. Those are the mistakes that stand out, because opportunities are limited. But he also showed he can be a chain mover. For a 7th-round pick, you couldn't ask for a better audition. The challenge is that Maffa is the type of back you might sneak through waivers, but he's also the kind you might regret losing if another team scoops him up. And then there's Miles Sanders. A few weeks ago, it looked like the Cowboys were leaning toward keeping him. He didn't play in this game, which usually signals security, but in his case, it's because of a shoulder injury. That complicates things. If he's not healthy, do you burn a roster spot just to hold him? And even if he is healthy, did his preseason work show enough to justify keeping him over Vaughn or Maffa? Right now, Sanders feels like the true wild card. He could make the 53, or he could be gone altogether. So here's the question for you. If you could only keep one of these three, who would it be? Deuce Vaughn, Phil Maffa, or Miles Sanders? Drop the name in the comments and let's see which back the fan base rallies behind. And remember, the more feedback we gather here, the sharper these roster discussions get. While you're at it, give this video a like if you'd watch a full breakdown of the Cowboys running back situation, and hit subscribe. We're locked in on the road to 16,000. On the defensive side, the preseason finale gave us plenty to chew on. Let's start with Mazi Smith. He's been one of the most talked about young players all camp, and against Atlanta, he finally gave fans something more encouraging. He had a tackle for loss. Yes, it was gift-wrapped since nobody blocked him on the play, but he still capitalized, and that's what matters. More importantly, he looked more active and noticeable overall. The truth is, he still has a long way to go before anyone calls him a consistent difference-maker, but this was a step forward. You want your big defensive tackle to pop on film, and for once, he did. Perrion Winfrey is another name who showed up in a big way. He's disruptive and played all over the line, even taking some snaps standing up on the edge, something nobody expected. 4 tackles, a sack, and multiple quarterback hits make a strong argument for his roster spot. He isn't polished, but he brings juice. Alongside him, James Houston had himself a game too. 3 tackles, 2 for loss, a sack, and constant pressure. If I were building this roster, I'd make space for him. Sometimes you just have to keep playmakers, even if it means letting go of a more established but less impactful veteran. The challenge, of course, is numbers. Dallas has depth at edge rusher and interior, but you can't keep everyone. Decisions will have to be made between players like Winfrey, Mazi Smith, and Jay Tovia. Realistically, at least one of them won't survive cutdown day. That's the cruel math of the NFL. Then, you add in guys like Elijah Clark, who flashed with splash plays and could be a practice squad stash, and suddenly the choices get even tougher. Not everyone helped their case. Rele, for example, had that interception on an underthrown ball, but outside of that, he was picked on repeatedly. and even let up a touchdown where the effort just wasn't there. You can't afford to have corners jogging at the goal line, not in preseason when every snap is an audition. He's not someone I'd want to see carried into the regular season, even on the practice squad. So let me put the tough decision in your hands. If you had to cut one between Perrion Winfrey, Maisie Smith, or Jay Tovia, who are you letting go? Comment your pick, PW, MS, or JT. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the roster projection coming right after cutdown day. We're closing in on 16,000 subscribers, and your support keeps all this coverage rolling. We can't wrap up this preseason conversation without addressing the biggest storyline hovering over the Cowboys, Micah Parsons. His situation has been simmering all off-season, and if you've been paying attention, the signs of frustration are everywhere. The trade request wasn't a rumor, it was real. The social media scrubs, the distance from reporters, the frustration boiling over, all of it points to a player who isn't happy with where things stand. And while Jerry Jones can say one thing publicly, fans know the reality. Micah wants clarity. He wants commitment. And until that happens, this shadow is going to hang over the team. From the fan perspective, it's simple. You want this done. Parsons is the type of player who changes games by himself. He wrecks offensive game plans, he raises the ceiling of the defense, and when he's locked in, the Cowboys look like contenders. The longer this drags on, the more distractions pile up, and that's the last thing you want heading into a season where expectations are already heavy. Whether it's Jerry refusing to budge on a contract or Micah digging in on leverage, neither side truly wins if this stretches into the games that matter. So where does that leave us? Waiting. Waiting for clarity on Parsons, waiting for the final roster to be announced, and waiting to see which young players survive cutdowns. Some guys who flash this preseason will stick, some will land on the practice squad, and others will be gone by the next time we talk. That's the harsh reality of the NFL. Now it's your turn. Do you believe the Parsons situation gets resolved before the season opener? Yes or no? Drop your take in the comments. And while you're here, help us close in on 16,000 subscribers by hitting that button right now. More roster news is coming and you won't want to miss it.